The lockbox was already hanging on my father's front door when I carried his breakfast out that morning, a small gray box with a code inside it, so strangers could tour the house he had wired with his own 2 hands. For 4.5 years I had fed that man, bathed him, and written down every pill he swallowed, and my brother had signed the whole house away for $10 on a single sheet of paper. Here is what my brother did not know while he was doing it. Today, I work at a law firm that protects old men, exactly like my father. And the spiral notebook my family used to laugh at, the one where I wrote down his days, turned out to be worth more than the house. My name is Tessa Marsh. I am 41 years old, and I live in Spokane, Washington. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where the quiet ones in the family finally tell you the whole thing, start to finish, in their own steady voice. If you have ever been the one who stayed while everybody else sent their love from a safe distance, this story belongs to you too. Stay with me and subscribe if it speaks to you, because I am going to walk you through every page of it. It starts 4.5 years before the morning I found that lockbox. One phone call on an ordinary Tuesday at 2:17 p.m. I was at the front desk of a dental office when the hospital called. I had worked that desk for 11 years. I scheduled root canals and soothed nervous patients, and I was good at it, because I come from a family where somebody always had to be soothed. The nurse on the phone said my father had collapsed at the hardware store, a stroke. He was 74. He was alive. Those were the only 3 facts I could hold on the drive over, so I held them with both hands. My father was an electrician for 41 years. Union man, coffee thermos man, the kind of man who paid off his little brick house on Garland Avenue early, and then kept working 3 more years, because he liked the feeling of a finished job. When I got to his room, the stroke had taken most of his left side and most of his sentences. It had not taken his eyes. He looked at me from that bed, the way he used to look at a panel of tangled wiring, like the problem was bad, but solvable. If somebody would just stand still and do the work. I stood still. I did the work. I want to be honest with you about how that happened, because nobody forced me. My brother Wade lives 20 minutes away, on the South Hill, with his wife and his daughter, and a job title with the word senior in it. He sells home loans. Our mother lives across town, and she has always believed that Wade hung the moon, and I was born to hold the ladder. When the doctors said Dad could come home, but not alone, there was a family meeting in a hospital hallway that lasted 4 minutes. Wade had payments. Wade had a career. Wade's wife had opinions about her guest room. And I was single, and I rented, and everyone agreed. In that warm way, families agree about your life without asking you, that it just made sense. So I gave up my apartment and moved into my father's house, into my old bedroom with the outlet he had let me wire myself. When I was 11, I dropped to part-time at the dental office. I learned his pills, his blood pressure cuff, the exercises for his left hand. And on the first night, because I am the kind of person I am, I started a spiral notebook, green cover, 1 subject, $1 and a quarter, at the drugstore, every day, got a page, what he ate, what he said, what the numbers were. I was not building anything. I was just a scared daughter with a pen, writing her father's life down so it could not slip through my fingers. Remember that notebook. Everyone else in this story forgot it, and it cost them. 2 weeks after Dad came home, my brother arrived with a folder. This was 4 years before the morning of the lockbox, and I need you to see it the way I saw it then, because at the time, I was grateful. Wade sat at Dad's kitchen table in his work clothes and laid out papers like a man doing us all a favor. On his lunch break, he said, Dad's bills were a mess. He said. Checks were going to bounce. And he slid one document into the middle of the table and said the phrase that would run this family for the next 4 years. Someone has to be practical. Tess, I handle the money. You handle, Dad. The paper was a power of attorney. If you have never seen one, it is simple, and it is enormous. It is a permission slip. It says one person can sign for another person. Checks, accounts, contracts, anything. As if their two hands were the same hands. Dad was 6 weeks past a stroke, tired, embarrassed by his own slow mouth. And here was his son, the lone man. The one who spoke bank, offering to carry the heaviest boxes. Dad gripped the pen in his good hand and signed. It took him a long time. Wade capped the pen, and I remember this exactly. I said, "Thank you." I thanked him. It took me 4 years to find out what I had thanked him for. Here is the part I did not know then, and you should know now, so you can watch for it in your own family. A permission slip like that has one unbreakable rule inside it, written right into the law. The person holding it must use it for the owner's good, not their own. They cannot pay themselves. They cannot gift themselves. The paper makes them a servant of the signature, not the owner of it. Wade read loan documents for a living. Wade knew that rule better than anyone in the county. Hold on to that. It comes back. For a while, the arrangement even looked like it was working. The lights stayed on. The property taxes got paid. And I was drowning in the good way, the busy way. Speech therapy on Mondays. The left hand slowly waking up. Dad relearning words like a man hauling, each one up a flight of stairs. The first time he got a full sentence out, it was about coffee. Of course it was about coffee. I wrote it in the notebook and drew a little star next to it. His green steel thermos, the one he had carried onto job sites for 30 years, went back into service on the porch rail. Every morning he dented, ugly, faithful. He held it with his good hand and watched the street. And if you have ever nursed somebody you love back from the edge, you know that a morning like that does not feel small. It feels like winning. 3 years and 4 months before the lockbox, the truck went, and that was the first pull of the thread, though I did not feel it yet. Dad had a pickup, dark blue, paid off, sitting in the driveway going nowhere, because the stroke had ended his driving. Wade said it was silly to insure a truck nobody drove. That was true. Wade said he had a buyer, and the money would go straight into Dad's account for his care. That sounded true. The truck sold for $9,500. I know that number now, to the dollar. At the time, I knew nothing, because I never saw the money and I never saw a statement. And here is why. That same season, the mail changed. Dad's bank envelopes stopped coming to the house. When I asked, Wade said he had switched everything to paperless and pointed all of it to his own address, to consolidate, to keep it organized, to be. And there it was again. I stood at the mailbox with a handful of grocery flyers and a feeling I could not name. I told myself the feeling was ingratitude. My family had trained me well. When something felt wrong, my first suspect was always me. So, the money went quiet. And in a house, when the money goes quiet, you do not hear anything at all. That is the whole trick of it. There was no scene. There was no shouting in a driveway. There was just a mailbox full of nothing, twice a week, for 3 years. Stay with me, because the next person who walks into this story is the one who saved my life without ever raising her voice. 3 years before that morning, the county approved Dad for a home aid, 2 afternoons a week. and a woman named Des started coming on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Des is short for Odessa. She is 60, built like Patience, and she had been doing home care since before I could drive. She did not fuss over Dad, and she did not fuss over me. And in that house, being left unfussed was the closest thing to rest I had felt in a year. She noticed the green notebook on the counter. The first week, she flipped one page with a finger, read my little columns, the meals, and the words and the numbers. And she nodded once, like a foreman approving a weld. I did not know it yet, but that woman was going to say the one sentence I will carry for the rest of my life. Now, let me take you to the family meeting about options, because before the lockbox, before any of it, there was a Sunday, 1 year out from that morning, when they told me what the plan was without ever telling me what the plan was. My mother hosted. She makes a pot roast the way other people build an alibi, and the whole meal had an agenda taped underneath it. Over dessert, Wade set brochures on the table. Assisted living. Glossy pictures, fountains, a couple laughing over checkers. He said we needed to talk about long-term options. For Dad, he said, the house was a lot for me. He said, and I quote him, because I went home and wrote it down that night. You cannot do this forever, Tess. And honestly, it is not healthy, how much you have wrapped yourself up in it. Read that sentence again. The man who was quietly bleeding my father's accounts was worried about my health. I said, Dad was doing better, which was true. His speech was coming back in short, stubborn rows. He did the crossword now, most days, with me, reading the clues. I said he wanted to be in his own house, which was also true, because he had told me so. 4 words at a time, more than once. My mother folded her napkin and delivered the family verdict in the family voice. Tessa, honey, someone has to be practical. That phrase, again, keep counting. It matters at the end. 2 things happened after that dinner that I filed away wrong. First, Wade started coming by the house when I was out, which I only knew because Dad would tell me in his short sentences. Wade came, took pictures. When I asked Wade, he said it was for the homeowner's insurance, updating records. I checked later. The insurance never changed. The photos were not for a policy. They were for a listing. Second, 6 weeks before that morning, I came home from the pharmacy, and there was a couple in the driveway, a man and a woman in matching gray vests, photographing the front of the house. They said they were doing a valuation for the county. I waved. I am ashamed of that wave now. Counties do not send couples in matching vests with a wide-angle lens. Buyers do. If you are listening to this while you fold laundry, I want you to hear the shape of what was happening, because it is the same shape it always has. Nobody was screaming. Nobody was cruel to my face. Every single step was dressed up as help. That is how it is done to people like us. Not with a crowbar, with brochures. And now, we are there. The morning itself. I am going to slow down and give it to you minute by minute, because I have replayed it enough times to have it memorized. It was a Saturday, in October, at 7:40 am. I carried Dad's oatmeal out to the porch, cinnamon on top, thermos under my arm. Same as every morning for 4.5 years. The air had that first cold edge in it. And there it was, hanging off the front door handle, where the Christmas wreath usually goes, a gray, metal lockbox, the kind realtors use. A key to my father's house, boxed up for strangers. On a door I had walked through my whole life. I stood there, holding oatmeal. Dad was 3 feet away in his porch chair. And he was looking at the box too, and his face was doing the thing it did when the words would not line up fast enough for the size of the thought. At 8:05 am, I called, Wade. I kept my voice level, because Dad was listening. I said, there is a lockbox on the door, and my little brother, who I taught to ride a bike on this exact street, exhaled like I was a delay in his morning, and said, okay, look, we were going to talk to you this weekend. Anyway, we were going to talk to you about the sign going up on the house. I asked him one question. I asked how he could list a house that belonged to Dad. And there was a pause, short, but I heard it. The pause of a man checking which lane he was already in. And he said, it is handled, Tess. It is not Dad's house anymore. It has been taken care of. For months. You would not understand the details. I would not understand the details. Write that on a stone somewhere, because understanding details is now what I do for a living. The family meeting happened that same afternoon, 4 p.m., at my mother's apartment, pot roast smell, and all, and I came to it still thinking, God help me, that this was a misunderstanding, that some paperwork had gotten ahead of some conversation. I sat down and asked plainly, what does it mean? It is not Dad's house. Wade explained it, the way he would explain a rate sheet. Months ago, he had moved the house into his own name, for protection, he said. Estate reasons, he said. So, it would not get eaten by care costs down the road. He was fluent and calm, and he never once looked at his hands. The sale would fund a really nice place for Dad, a facility with a memory wing. And honestly, it was overdue. And I, personally, would finally be free to. And this is the quote I will never forget. Get my own life back. My own life. Handed to me like a coat at the end of a party. I asked what Dad's share of the sale would be, and where the truck money had gone, and why I had not seen a bank statement in 3 years. And my mother put down her fork and looked at me with real disappointment, the kind she saves for me alone, and said, Tessa, your brother has managed everything for 4 years, while you played nurse. Someone had to be practical. Do not make this ugly. Played nurse. 4.5 years. Played. Here is what 41 years of being the quiet one trained me to do in that moment. And I did it. Nothing. What is you? I did not shout. I did not cry. I looked at my brother, and he looked back with the smooth, patient face of a man who has already been to the county recorder's office. And I stood up, and I said I had to get back to Dad. And I left. But something had changed in the car by the time I turned onto Garland Avenue. And I can tell you exactly what it was. All my life. When this family pushed, some part of me went soft and started apologizing. That part did not come with me out of that apartment. What came instead was very quiet and very cold, and it sounded like this. They put a key to your father in a box. For strangers, go get his life back. That evening, at 6:10 p.m., I packed 2 duffel bags. Dad's clothes, his pills and their organizer, his crossword book, the green thermos, and every one of my spiral notebooks. 7 of them by then. 4.5 years of his days in my handwriting. I told Dad we were going to stay somewhere quiet for a while. His choice, and he looked at the lockbox on his own front door for a long moment. And then he said, in that slow, stubborn, hauled up the stairs voice, 4 words, not their house. Ours. Ours. We drove away from his paid-off brick house with everything that actually mattered in 2 bags on the back seat. Des met me at her sister's rental duplex with the key, because when I had called her that afternoon, she had not asked a single question except, what time? And that night, on the duplex steps, while Dad slept in a strange room with his thermos on the nightstand, I finally came apart a little, not crying, just shaking. And I told Des I had nothing. No house, no plan, no proof, nothing but a car and a stack of notebooks. And Des looked at the notebooks in the box by my feet, 4.5 years of them, and she said the sentence, "Keep writing, baby. Paper is how the quiet ones testify." If you have ever had somebody say the exact thing you needed in the exact moment you needed it, you know. It does not feel like advice. It feels like a door unlocking. If someone in your family ever took something from you and called it being practical, put the word practical in the comments. I read every one, and I promise you are not the only one. And stay with me, because everything you have heard so far is what they did to us. Everything from here is what the paper did to them. Let me compress the next stretch, because you already know we survived it. And survival is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what survival turned into. The first month after that morning was rent I could barely make, a part-time paycheck, and a father relearning a new kitchen. The second month, I found the phone number for the legal service that comes with Dad's union retirement, the benefit he had paid into for 41 years, and never used once. That call is how we met. Miss Okafor, elder law attorney, office above a sandwich shop, reading glasses on a chain, and a way of listening that made you feel like your facts were being weighed on a real scale. For the first time in your life, I brought her everything I had, which I thought was nothing. I was wrong about that, in a way that still makes me smile. The first thing Miss Okafor did was order a simple doctor's evaluation, because everything else depended on it. A neurologist spent 2 hours with Dad and wrote a letter that said, in careful medical language, what I had known for 4 years. The stroke had taken speech and muscle. It had not taken judgment. My father understood his money, his property, and his choices. He was slow. He was not gone. And a man who is not gone can fire the person holding his permission slip. So he did. 3 months after that October morning, in Miss Okafor's office, my father revoked the power of attorney he had signed at his own kitchen table. It took him almost a minute to sign his name, and the room waited, and nobody breathed loud. And when he finished, he set down the pen and said, clear as a bell, hung in cold air, done. A certified letter went to Wade the same week, telling him his authority was over, effective immediately, and instructing the bank to freeze his access. 2 days later, my phone lit up with the first of many calls. I did not answer. You will hear about those calls. They get worse, and then, from a certain point of view, they get much better. Now, the rebuild. I will give it to you as a list, because it was lived as a list. I kept the dental job. I enrolled in night classes at the community college, paralegal certificate, 2 evenings a week, because Des had planted a seed with that sentence of hers, and it had rooted in me sideways. I learned what a deed actually is. I learned what recording means and what a fiduciary is, which is just a heavy word for the rule I told you about at the kitchen table. The one who holds the pen serves the one who owns the name. I sat in a classroom of 22-year-olds with my highlighters lined up like surgical tools. And for the first time since the stroke, I was not only reacting to my life, I was arming it. 14 months after that morning, I finished the certificate. 16 months after, Miss Okafor's firm posted an opening, and I walked my resume up the stairs past the sandwich shop myself. They hired me, and I want to be completely straight with you about something, because this genre of story loves a shortcut, and I refuse to give you one. From the day I was hired, I never worked on my own father's case. Not one file, not one phone call, not one photocopy. His case stayed with Miss Okafor and her partner, behind a wall, the way the rules require. I did not need to touch it. I was the client's daughter, and the evidence was going to come from where evidence actually comes from. Records, kept by institutions, requested the boring, lawful way. Understand this about how we finally beat them. Because it is the whole point of my story. We never needed a lucky break. We never needed somebody to leave a speakerphone on. The case against my brother was sitting in filing cabinets the entire time, patient as winter, waiting for one person to ask for it in writing. During those months, the duplex became a home, whether it asked to be or not. Dad claimed the porch. The thermos went back on a rail. Sunday mornings, I read crossword clues, and he hauled the answers up the stairs of himself. And I still wrote his days down in the notebooks. Out of habit. Out of love. Number 8 by then number 9. Des came Tuesdays, off the clock half the time, and drank her coffee black, and said almost nothing, which remained her superpower. And then, 18 months after the morning of the lockbox, the records started arriving. This is the part you have been waiting for. I am going to open the folder for you one page at a time, exactly the way it was opened for me, because I want you to feel each page land. Page 1. The deed. Anybody can pull a recorded deed. It is a public document sitting at the county recorder's office, which is just the building where ownership gets written down, so the world can rely on it. Miss Okafor had pulled it in the first month. It was one page. A quitclaim deed, which is the simplest, bluntest instrument in all of real estate. No inspection, no bank, no question. One page that says, I hand my house to you, and on that page, my father's little brick home on Garland Avenue, 41 years of his labor, passed to my brother for the recorded price of, and I am quoting the document, $10. And love, and affection, $10. Tend, and love, and affection. The county makes you state what was paid. That is what he wrote. I have heard people gasp at that line when I tell this story out loud, and they are right to. Page 2. The signature and the stamp. This is the page that ends him. So slow down with me. A deed like that needs the owner's signature, and it needs a notary. A notary's whole job is one simple, sacred thing. Watch the person sign, in the room, in person, then press the stamp. The stamp is a witness that cannot lie. It says, I saw this happen on this date. The stamp on my father's deed was dated February 9th, the winter before the lockbox. According to that page, my father stood up, took a pen, and signed his house away in front of a licensed witness on February 9th. Now, here is what I did when I read that date. I did not shout. I did not call anyone. I stood up from my own kitchen table, and I walked to the shelf, and I took down spiral notebook, number 6, because every day for 4.5 years got a page, and February 9th had a page, and I am going to read you what the page says, word for word, in my handwriting, in ink that was dry a year before anyone thought to lie about that date. February 9th. Hospital, day 3. Pneumonia. Oxygen at 91. 8.5. A pear cup. Asked for his thermos. Nurses changed at 7 p.m. My father did not sign anything on February 9th. My father was in a hospital bed downtown with a tube under his nose, asking for his coffee thermos, while I sat in the chair beside him charting his oxygen. Like the scared, thorough, ridiculous daughter I have always been. He was admitted on February 7th. He was discharged on February 12th. The hospital's own records requested lawfully said so on letterhead. To the hour, there are 6 days in the life of my family, where my father, provably, could not have stood in front of a notary. My brother picked one of them. They laughed at the notebook. Is the thing, my mother once called it, my little diary. Wade used to flip it around on the counter and smirk at the pear cups and the blood pressure numbers. Nobody laughs at a dated, contemporaneous record when it is sitting next to a forged deed. Des was right. In every direction at once. Paper is how the quiet ones testify. I just never dreamed the paper would be mine. Page 3. The fee pages. This is where the money went quiet, and where I finally heard it. Once the permission slip was revoked and the account was back in Dad's control, his own bank produced 3 years of statements, because the account holder asked, which is all it ever took. I read them at my kitchen table on a Tuesday night after class, and I want to tell you plainly what was in them, and then I will tell you what it cost me to read it. Starting 3 years before the lockbox, the same month, the mail went quiet. A withdrawal begins appearing, monthly, labeled, in my brother's own online banking notes. Management fee, $850 a month. For 36 months. That is $30,600. My brother charged our stroke survivor, father, a monthly fee for the privilege of being robbed, and labeled it like a service. And the truck money, the $9,500 that went straight into Dad's account for his care. It did go in. It stayed 11 days. Then it went out again, in 2 transfers, to an account ending in numbers I now know belong to my brother. Added up the way I had to. $30,600, $9,500, $40,100 taken from a man who could not read his own mail because his son had redirected it. $40,000 is not a number to a retired electrician. It is roughly 2 years of his union pension. It is every respite weekend I never took, every 8-hour the county would not cover, every winter coat bought on sale. It was his safety, converted into someone else's boat payment, $850 at a time, while that someone told the family I was the one living off Dad. That last part is the one that got me, because they had said it, at tables I was not at, for years, that I was camped in the house, playing nurse, spending his money. The one member of this family who never took a dime had been cast as the thief, by the thief, and the audience had applauded. I read the last statement, and I squared the pages, and I put them in the folder. Then I walked out to my car in the dark, and I sat behind the wheel in the driveway of a rented duplex, and I cried. Once. Au Danbase Fund. Alone. 11 minutes. By the clock on the dash, with my hand over my mouth, so my father would not hear it through the window. That is the only time in this entire story that I cried, and I am not ashamed of a second of it. And when the 11 minutes were over, they were over. I wiped my face. I went inside. I checked that Dad's thermos was set up for morning, because some rituals are load-bearing, and I slept better than I had in 2 years, because here is the thing about that folder, and I need you to feel this with me. Grief was in it, yes, but so was the end of the argument. For 4.5 years, this family had run on their version against my feelings. Feelings lose that fight every time. But now it was their version against the county recorder, the hospital admissions office, the bank's own printouts, and a green spiral notebook with a star drawn next to my father's first full sentence. That is not a fight. That is arithmetic. That detail about the notary stamp, the witness that cannot lie, keep it in your hand, because a stamp that lies does not just doom a deed. It dooms every person who arranged for it to lie. And my brother worked in an industry that lives and dies on the honesty of stamps. Now, the reckoning. And I want to set your expectations honestly, because I know what stories like mine usually promise. There was no screaming match. There was no viral moment. What there was, instead, was a Tuesday in spring, 2 years after the morning of the lockbox, when my brother asked for a family meeting to sort this out like adults. No lawyers. And I said yes. I said yes because Miss Okafor had already done the lawful, boring, devastating things in order, in writing. The lawsuit was filed, my father as the plaintiff, asking the court to undo the $10 deed and return his money under the state law that protects vulnerable adults from exactly this. A report had gone to Adult Protective Services, which is the county office, whose entire job is investigating when an older person is being used. And notice of the pending case had been recorded against the house itself, which is a public flag on the title. And I will tell you in a minute what that little flag did all by itself. So when Wade called asking to talk like family, the talking was already over. I went. Anyway, I went because I had one page of my own to deliver, and because after 41 years, I had earned the right to be the person reading the list, instead of the person on it. My mother's dining table. Pot roast smell. Of course. Wade in a golf shirt, leaning back with his arms spread along the chairs, like a man hosting his own intervention. My mother, with her disappointed face, pre-loaded. Wade opened with a speech he had clearly rehearsed in the car, about how things had gotten out of hand, about stress on all sides, about how Dad would be devastated to see his kids like this. He used the word family 9 times. I counted, because counting is what I do now. When he finished, I took out one sheet of paper, and I read it. 5 items. Item. I had practiced at my kitchen table, so my voice would stay level, and it stayed level. 1. Dad revoked your power of attorney 22 months ago. A doctor certified his judgment. Anything you have signed as him since that day is worthless, and everything you signed before it is under review. 2. Adult Protective Services has an open file with a case number. I am not allowed to discuss it, and neither are you, but you will be hearing from them, if you have not already. 3. On February 9th of that winter, a notary stamp says Dad stood and signed his house over to you. Hospital records say he was admitted on February 7th and discharged on February 12th. I sat beside his bed all 6 days. I wrote each one down as it happened. The court now has the deed, the hospital records, and my notebooks, side by side. 4. The state board that licenses people who handle other people's home loans has received the same folder, every page of it. You know better than I do what they do with folders like that. 5. Dad's address is no longer your business. From today, anything you want to say to him, or to me, goes through Miss Okafor's office. This is the last table I will ever sit at with you. Then I folded the page, and in the silence, my mother found her voice, and God bless her consistency. She reached for the only tool the family ever owned. Tessa, he is your brother. Someone had to be practical. I stood up, and I pushed in my chair, because my father raised me to push in my chair, and I said the sentence I had been saving for 2 years. You are right. Someone had to be practical. Now, someone is. And I walked out of that apartment, past the pot roast, down the stairs into the spring evening. And I did not shake, and I did not cry. And I drove home to a man doing a crossword on a rented porch, and I read him the clues until the light went. Now, the consequences. Because I promised you that everything from the walkout forward was what the paper did to them. And here is what the paper did. In flat, plain order, every bit of it lawful. most of it inevitable from the moment one thorough daughter started writing pear cups in a notebook. The sale of the house died first, and it died quietly, months before the reckoning, and Wade never even got to be angry at a human being about it. That public flag on the title did the work. A title company's entire job is to guarantee that a house's ownership is clean before money changes hands. No title company on earth insures a $10 deed with a fraud case recorded against it. The listing came down. The lockbox came off. Strangers stopped getting the code to my father's front door, and no one had raised their voice to accomplish it. Paper against paper. And half. Ours was simply true. The lawsuit never saw a trial, because his own attorney could read a hospital admission sheet, as well as anybody. Faced with the stamp, the dates, and the notebooks, my brother signed a settlement. 2 parts. Part 1, a corrective deed, 1 page, recorded at the same county office, putting the house back in my father's name, the same way it left. Except this time, the consideration listed was the truth being restored. Part 2, a judgment for the money. $40,100, plus interest, plus my father's legal costs, paid monthly, with Wade's signature at the bottom of a payment schedule that runs for years. Every month, on the 1st, a payment lands in my father's account with my brother's name on it. My father calls it, in his 4-word way, the practical money. The first time he said that, Des laughed so hard she had to set down her coffee. The notary, whose stamp swore it watched a hospitalized man sign a deed, surrendered her commission after the state looked into it. She work in my brother's office. I will let you sit with that, the way I had to. Adult Protective Services came too, and I want to describe that visit, because I know what it is to have officials at your door, and I know how these stories usually weaponize that fear. A caseworker sat with my father at the duplex kitchen table for over an hour, with me out of the room, because that is how it is properly done. She asked him, who managed his money. He said, I do now. She asked him if he felt safe. He looked at the porch, at the thermos on the rail, at the crossword folded to Tuesday, and he said, took long enough. Weeks later, a letter arrived on county letterhead, addressed to my father, and it contained 1 word, doing the work of 1,000. The finding on the report of financial exploitation was substantiated. The county, in writing, after its own independent look, saying the quiet daughter had been right. I did not frame that letter. I filed it in the folder where true things live, but I will not pretend to you that I did not read it standing up twice before I put it away. And the licensing board. It took 11 months, which felt long until I understood that thoroughness was the entire point. Then a public document appeared on the state's website, the kind anyone can look up, with my brother's full name on it, and the word that ended his career in the industry that made him surrendered. He is not a loan officer anymore. He is not banned from working. He is banned from being trusted with other people's signatures, which, if you have followed this story at all, you will agree is simply the record catching up to the man. Last I heard, he sells used trucks. I did not plan that shape. Life drew it. On its own. They did not take any of it quietly, and I want to give you this part too, because I know you have been carrying anger on my behalf for half an hour, and it deserves somewhere to go. After the reckoning, my phone filled up. Wade calling at 10 p.m., then 11 p.m., voice tight, saying I had destroyed the family over paperwork. My mother leaving long voicemails that opened with sweetheart and closed with shame, explaining that Wade only did what he did because somebody had to think ahead, and that a bigger person would let this go now that the house was back. Wade came to the duplex exactly once, on a Sunday, and stood at the curb. Because Miss Okafor's letter had been very clear about the property line, and my brother has always respected paper. more than people. He called out that he just wanted to talk to Dad, man to man, and my father, who was on the porch with his coffee, did not get up. He raised the green thermos an inch, the way you would acknowledge a stranger's wave, and he said, slow and level, 4 words, through the lawyer, son. Then he went back to his crossword. Wade stood at that curb for a full minute, looking at a porch he was not invited onto, outside a modest rented duplex that held more of this family's dignity than any house he ever listed. Then he got in his car and left. Dad asked me for a 5-letter word, for consequence. I did not have one. He wrote in, and I am not making this up, karma, counted the boxes, found it fit, and kept going. My mother showed up once at the firm, downstairs in the lobby, with a casserole dish and an audience of 2 paralegals. I came down. She said, in her church voice, that family forgives. I said, family also repays, and his next payment is due on the 1st. Then I went back upstairs. I am told. She stood there for a while. The casserole, I am told, was chicken and rice. At Christmas, a card came in, her careful handwriting, 2 pages about the weather, my niece's grades, the neighbor's dog, no apology anywhere in it. Women, like my mother, do not apologize. The language was never installed. Deaf, but at the bottom, 1 sentence doing all the lifting. Whatever you think of me, I only ever wanted this family to hold together. I read it twice. Then I filed it in the folder with everything else, because that is where statements go. And some of them are even true. Wanting a family to hold together is not the same as caring who gets crushed in the grip. I know the difference now. It cost me 41 years of tuition, but I know it. Here is the ending you might be expecting. So, let me hand it to you, and then take it back. You might be expecting the sale that never happened. Dad back in the brick house on Garland Avenue. Everything restored, roll credits. That is not what happened. And the reason why is my favorite part of this whole story. Because once the house was his again, free and clear and clean on the title, my father decided, all by himself, at his own pace, to sell it, his choice. This time, his pen, this time. He said the porch stairs were getting long, and the duplex street had better crossword light. And, in one of his longer sentences, a house is not the thing. Tess, the thing is who holds the pen. So last spring, we sat in a small conference room, and my father sold his own house, on his own terms, for $291,000, to a young couple expecting their first baby, who shook his good hand and asked about the wiring. And he said, slowly, proudly, and then came the moment, I want to leave you, standing inside of. The papers were laid out. The notary, a real one, sat across from him and watched in the room, in person the way it is supposed to work. And my father picked up the pen with his good hand, and he signed his name. It took him 40 seconds. The room went quiet and waited. All of it. The realtor, the couple, the clock. Nobody hurried him. And I watched a man haul his own name up the stairs of himself, letter by letter, and set it down where it belonged. And I will tell you honestly that it was the closest I came to breaking my 1-cry rule. And I held, because that room did not need my tears. It needed exactly what it got. A witness. The money went into a protected fund with his name on it, managed under court supervision, the kind of arrangement where every dollar has to answer for itself. In writing, my father, who spent 41 years making sure other people's houses would not burn down, finally has money that is fireproof. The family split the way families do, not in half, in fractions. My mother lives with Wade now, in his house, under his practicality. And by all accounts, she has opinions about how his wife loads a dishwasher. And I confess there are evenings I think about that arrangement, the two of them under one roof, both of them certain, and I have to set my tea down for a minute. Some cousins went silent toward me, which was quieter than I feared, and one thread got salvaged, the one I would have picked. My niece, 16, sharp, nobody's fool. She started showing up on Sundays on her own steam, and she does the crossword with her grandfather, reading him the clues the way I used to. And one afternoon she pointed at my shelf, at the row of green spiral notebooks, 11 of them now, and asked me to teach her how to read a deed. So, I am. Somebody in the next generation of this family is going to know what a stamp is for. That is my inheritance, and I am giving it away early. These days, Dad has the porch chair at the duplex, and the green thermos sits on the rail every morning, dented, ugly, faithful, 40-some years old, and outlasting everything that was supposed to be permanent. Des still comes Tuesdays, off the clock, and drinks her coffee black. I still write in the notebook most nights, out of habit, out of love, what he ate, what he said, the numbers. Mom, they thought I was keeping a diary. They thought I was writing down a burden. I was writing down a man. And when the day came that the whole world was asked to choose between a license stamp and a tired daughter's handwriting, the handwriting won because it had done the one thing that stamp never did. It showed up every single day and told the truth. If you carry one thing out of my story, carry this. In every family like mine, there is a person they call not practical. The soft one, the one who stays, who feeds, who writes the little pages nobody reads. Hear me from my porch. Staying is not weakness. Recording is not smallness. Your notebook, your receipts, your dated, boring, faithful attention. That is not you failing to live your life. That is you holding the pen. And the people who call themselves practical, while they empty an old man's account, are counting on exactly one thing, that the quiet ones will stay quiet in the one moment it matters. Do not. Someone in my family always said, someone has to be practical. They were right. It just turned out to be me. Think about where this story lived. A gray lock box on a father's front door, a deed that priced 41 years of a man's work at $10, and love, and affection, and a green spiral notebook that a whole family laughed at, sitting on a courthouse table next to a hospital record, quietly ending the laughter for good. If you have been the quiet one, if your care got renamed as freeloading while somebody practical held the pen, tell me one thing in the comments. The thing you wrote down that nobody thought mattered. I read every one, and if this story steadied you, subscribe to Calm Drama Stories, because the quiet ones are not done talking. Until next time, keep your records close, and your thermos closer.